Welcome to Belong. I'm Kevin, and I'm excited to share with you my conversation with Carmen Palmer, CEO of Women in Product. Women in Product was founded in 2016 by a group of women product leaders, and the nonprofit has grown to serve a community of over 30,000 women and non-binary individuals worldwide. We'll discuss the challenges of connecting with that global community and even the tools and platforms that can help enhance connection and engagement. I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I have. Carmen, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. I know we've been talking about this for a while, and I am just excited to dig in on the work you're doing at Women in Product. But first, I want to kind of back up. And for folks who aren't familiar with Women in Product, would you give us kind of a quick overview?
Of course. And before I start that, Kevin, thank you for inviting me to chat with you on your Belong podcast. I think that what you're doing is really amazing. And I really love the idea of really talking about community and what that means, especially as I'm coming into building and reinforcing what we're doing at Women in Product. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Carmen Palmer. I'm the CEO of Women in Product, and we're a nonprofit organization that was put together in 2016. Deb Liu, Avni Shah, Hanwin, lots of folks with product backgrounds and product executives had brought together a group of women. It started out as dinners and women who really needed other folks to commiserate with, to share ideas and stories and do some development as they were making their way through their career journeys as product leaders. And so in the very beginning, it grew so much that they put together a Women in Product conference. So before anything was started, before the organization was put together, it was bringing together women in product to upskill and to network and really to share and celebrate the work that we're doing and how do you get through it? How do you get to those levels in a way that's sustainable, that people are thriving? So that was in 2016. And fast forward to now, we are a 30,000 plus women community, women and non-binary individuals. We look at bringing the community together both through our conference. So we'll be having our 10th conference this year in person in San Francisco. And we also run programs and events. It's a volunteer community as well. So, for example, when we put on our conferences, we have folks from the community who speak or they run workshops. It's just a really magical community where you have folks who have wisdom, who want to give back to folks who are emerging in their careers. It's a way to network, it's a way to upskill. And I don't know how to describe it. It's just the energy of the community is just really amazing and unmatched. And I think that that's why people continue to, participate with us and the community continues to grow.
Definitely. And I know when you and I talked to get ready for this, a lot of that growth has been organic and driven by those volunteers. And you have different groups in different regions. And what's it like trying to look at that massive collection of activities and people who are so invested, but not really all connected together? Because I know that from when we spoke, that's one of the things you really want to tackle is how do you make this one community or at least have everybody moving in the same direction and talking to each other?
Yeah,
What's that been
absolutely.
like?
That's actually the biggest. I want to say that's one of the exciting challenges to tackle, like leading the organization. I was just on a call and I was saying that, the community of women in product, I think will exist without the organization because people naturally are going to find each other. So, for example, in the LA product community, sometimes it's hard to find other product managers. We're not like, yes, we were grown out of the Silicon Valley where there are lots of product managers there, but in other cities and states, it's not necessarily as prevalent. Like I spoke with a coach who basically put together her own community because there wasn't a community of women product managers that she could share stories with, that she could really bounce things off of. So in pockets, the communities, those sort of local communities kind of exist on their own. But when I look at the landscape, as you know, as you kind of described, the goals are similar, the experiences are similar, and they can learn from each other. So, for example, if we have our San Diego chapter that put together a really great mentorship program, and they tested it, piloted it, tried it out, is very successful. How can some of those other local chapters really learn from that and not have to reinvent the wheel? How can we share tools across, and for them, these local community builders, to build those out? So that's like just sort of one example of, we can see at the, at the organizational level where folks are trying to connect and folks want to be together, and how can we actually take that energy and leverage it to make the community actually stronger and, have more impact. So if we can have everyone sort of under an umbrella, then we can really share out, here are the additional resources, here are additional people in the network, that you may be able to connect with. So as an example, we're looking at things like having like expert office hours. So even if you're in a small city doing product management and there aren't a lot of folks there, you can access experts and you can access folks in the network who have that same shared experience, desire, and sort of goal to elevate women in product. So, yeah, I would say it's definitely a challenge. And this is where using things like technology and innovation and leveraging resources really makes that possible, because it's really about scaling the reach, and scaling the tools, and scaling so that we can really support better, make it easier for volunteers, because people in the community, ideally and hopefully, they're working in roles that they want to be in, or they're looking for them, but people are busy. So you mentioned, how do I do that, like from a product perspective? um, you look at who's in the community. These are people who are busy, who maybe have other jobs. So when we look at what we want to offer, we want to make sure we're looking at their persona. What do they need? What is the experience that they need to have? And making it easier and reducing friction for folks to connect is really a key goal for us in the coming year.
So I'm assuming when you started this process, did you end up having to just do like a massive audit of what do we have? What is going on in the world? Or were there places like hubs where you could figure out a lot of what was going on?
Yeah, so I would say that the organization, I came in as a CEO this last July, but the organization had done a good job of, hey, we do have our Salesforce backend where we have been very cognizant of bringing in who are members in the community, so that, for example, if we have speakers, we know, and organizations will ask us, oh, do you have speakers, like female product leader speakers, because we would like to showcase them. Like, how do we have our database of folks and their expertise? So we definitely have pockets of data and information about our members, so we can connect them and then we can reach out to them, right? As far as an audit, here's what I would say. I think that when you have like a sort of small team, I think the original team was about 9 folks that really organized, ran programs, put on the conference, connected folks. A lot of the connection was because it was very human, right? It's like that was very much the heart of the organization. So the more we get involved with the community and we understand what people's passions are, what they're working on, like folks who maybe are writing a book or are starting their own coaching practice, or they are an expert in AI. All of those folks, I think, we connect them with each other because we know them. And I think that that's an amazing way to do that. I think as a community leader and a community manager, that's your goal, is how do we really find where things are happening, connect folks, enable that energy in the best way possible. And that's what we need to scale. So when we talk about like those connection points, I think we did do an audit of like how can we actually understand, and we found that if we could really capture all of the folks in our Facebook groups and all of the folks in the newsletter and bring them all into one space. And then if we can also leverage tools to be able to connect and understand, then, that's kind of what we're doing. So yes, we did an audit. Yes, we have the data. And like with any kind of product development or any kind of products that you're building, like data is really king to understand who is in your community, what are their needs, and then maybe how do you reach other folks who may not know about us. So yes, we did an audit, and we're working from that audit now.
I'm sure that in and of itself is challenging. At the same time you're growing rapidly, you're looking for ways to build this out more so that people are connected across programs. I think one thing I want to dig into a little bit is how you transitioned from being an event driven kind of community to reaching all those people around the world who can't pack up and attend an event, because you have such a strong community around the world and most of them will probably never attend the conference. Just it's a fact of life. And I don't know, I feel like even before you started looking at, okay, what is the umbrella, there was already just so much in motion.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that the so much in motion part is, I think that that's actually really wonderful because when we say there's so much in motion, those are the local communities. Those are the women who really need folks and who want to put on programs and are putting on programs. And so what we can do is help them with the platform and help them with the reach. And so how do we get from like things that are sort of local and in person from event driven to online? So I would say that in the early days, there's probably multiple components that weren't necessarily, I would say, tied together seamlessly. So there would be a conference, and then people who went would know about that conference, and they say, "Oh, we should do, fill in the blank. We should do more of these smaller events," or "Hey, we should do like an executive roundtable program." And so just from coming together, the ideas, and mind you, these are like product people, a lot of who most are in tech, but we are across all industries. But keep in mind that these are people who love to build stuff and who are curious and want to understand and are really good at bringing teams together to get things done. So I actually think we live in a very special space for our community because it's actually very meta, and we try to think a bit about it as a flywheel, right? So when you start with event driven and you have folks who are very like innovation curious and that's what they work in every day, it's like how do we take that feeling of being in person and capture like what are we doing in person and how do you take that online? If you look back to the conference that we just did in 2023, that was 100% virtual. We did use a platform, but we really looked at the needs and requirements of what would an in-person event look like and how do you create that. So we really worked towards like workshops. How could you have breakout rooms that were interactive while people are still online, you're still trying to capture that essence of being in person, or speed networking. Like I participated in a lot of the speed networking. I met like many people, and sure, it's not the same thing as being in a room together and talking in person. But when you can't do that, this is a viable substitute. And then, so to your point, like, how do you get people to participate? These are the types of things where we want to be able to capture like that experience and meet that need and do it in a way that we can deliver online. Now, having said that, this year is a year that it's the first year that we're going back to in-person conference because everybody is feeling like they want to be in person, right? I don't know if you're saying this, but like post COVID, I think it took a little bit for folks to get back. And I think people are really getting their stride and are really longing to be in person and have that personal touch. So one of the things that we look at with the community is how can we use this online community, reach folks, but then also get them to participate together offline, right? So how do we get the word out that we have these events, or that connecting folks so they can get together in person, like, oh, there's a product manager like in Pasadena, let's connect together and let's have a like a coffee talk. The ability to do that when you understand who your members are and like where they're located and what their interests are, what their levels are, that makes that so much easier and enables us to sort of facilitate that. So
I love the fact that I mean, it was clear there was a need, and a lot of this grew organically from those initial dinners. I'm curious. You talked about the kind of the reach and the tools. You talked about having the CRM so that you actually have data on everyone involved at some level. Like, what other tools are you trying to bring into the mix? So I think it's interesting, like, when it comes to belonging and community, we always think of the in person, like that human connection. But at the same time, we've had conversations on the podcast about how you use data to better understand your community, the needs, where things need to be going. So I'm just super curious if you don't mind sharing, like,
not at
what
all.
kind of tools are you either using or looking at to help you in that process?
Definitely. So I think the core of things is our sort of CRM. That's like whether it's members, whether it's volunteers, speakers, or even organizations that sponsor us or partner with us, we try to get everything into our Salesforce instance, and that comes from multiple different places, whether it's from our Facebook communities, whether it's signups on our website, whether it's like participants from programs, all of that is in there. So that's one core piece. But I'd also say that we just launched our centralized online community space in November with Circle. And so we did a lot of research in terms of what is the right fit for our community in order to, for example, a space where we can run our events, that we can post our calendars, that we can have blogs, that there's also an ability to like self-serve as a community for like resources, a place for our local community leaders to have their resources and to collaborate with one another as they're building out communities, because there's different personas and different needs in the community. So that was one of the reasons why we launched on a community platform. There was a lot of talk about, do we just have a Slack community? Do we just do it in WhatsApp? But those are really great, I think, and we do actually use those. We have lots of different ways, like as the
Right.
communities have developed, a lot of them will come up with their own strategy. So some of them are using WhatsApp, some of them are using Slack, some of them are using email. It just kind of depends. But what we want to do is work to standardize across, because then if we can do that, then it's easier to connect folks. It's easier to say, oh, hey, in your space, we'll connect you with one of our program, the folks participating in this program. And that's how we can actually see and connect within the community. So I'm hopeful that once we're in there, or that we're in there, we're able to collect data there, and whether we're using native tools of the platform to help us understand, let's say, what are the discussions that are most popular, what's trending, what are the questions that are people coming up. We can either use native tools for that, but we could also leverage AI tools that we're evaluating many and some homegrown on, where are the spaces that we should be focusing on to meet the demand of the 30,000 plus community, right?
Right.
So say that we still, as while we have a large community, we're a nonprofit, and so there are different ways that we have to operate as a nonprofit. And then there are also, I would say, to some degree, we want to operate sort of product led. And so there's a startup component of it too. So there's certain things that we want to come up with the idea, really determine what we're addressing and what the problem to solve is and how we would measure it if we did a good job, and then do some pilots, test it out, and then roll it out to the community. So I'm sure that there are more tools that we will explore, and I look to the community and maybe partners to help us with that. But I still think that the exciting part is that we're embarking on this, and I think we're going to be opportunistic about what's going to make sense to help the organization and the community.
Yeah, you've got me thinking like when I spoke with Phil Terry not too long ago, we talked about not only bringing people together, but giving them some structure.
Yes,
I'm curious, like, was that part of the model when you were looking at building this platform? Not just here's a bunch of channels so you can ask some questions, but really trying to guide them on their journey.
100%. And Kevin, you and I met through Never Search Alone and the community of Never Search Alone. And so there are a lot of lessons and I think ideas that definitely came from things that we've experienced as part of a community. Because as I was saying before, folks in our community are busy. If you're a volunteer, you're carving out a few hours of time or like an hour of time, maybe even just once a month to give back. And so you don't want them to be spending that 1 hour of time trying to figure out how to help, right? You
Right.
want to be able to be very clear about here's a way that you can participate and here are some tools, and go run with it. So I think that that's an important part of what one of the problems, I guess, problems to solve and to tackle, because since we are a community and we while we have staff, we need volunteer help. And since these are product folks, and sometimes we can also run intern programs, how can we make it easy for people to pick up a project, provide a structure for them, have them be able to run with it, and have like those right, I guess, checks and balances to ensure it's aligned with the overall mission and approach that the organization is taking. As an example, I was actually just talking about this last week. When you're talking about bringing folks together, there's an operations around bringing people together, right? When if you break it down from that perspective, and if you have like let's take a mentorship program. If we have a mentorship program that's developed and we share that, say, with another local chapter who also wants to do it, and they say, oh, we had this other scenario, and so we modified the program to, let's say, include a weekly check-in across all of the mentors. And I remember when we were a lot of the ways that we built things in Never Sister Alone was like if there's something that you want to add, you go to the moderator meeting and you talk about it and we say, "Hey, that's a really great idea. Go in and just update the SOP." Right?
Yep.
And that's very self-served and a way to enable like growth, I think, and or maybe not growth, but a way to develop iteration to either get to the best answer or to expand it as it grows across the community. So I think that that ability to provide the structure and then provide the tools is really critical for, almost the community to thrive on its own. And so as the central part, that's like I think what the community is a community, right? That's what we want to cultivate. And I use the analogy of the communities like the garden. And in a way, we're like the gardener. We have the space and the garden is going to grow. We might need to add a little bit of water over here, or we might add a little bit of vitamins over here, or maybe we'll introduce, like fans in the summer, whatever that is. But the garden is the garden and it's going to grow because it wants to grow and it's going to be there. This is just about putting, some structures in there to make it easier and to enable it to thrive. And so that's when we think about what is our role for the community is to really enable that. And also since we have the relationships with organizations who want to work with us, it's about like connecting those organizations with the community. So in a way, I have a background in marketplaces. So I think about, hey, we're this is who we're serving, this community, and what are their needs? How can we go out and also bring in other help or other connections or other networks to interact? So
I almost feel like you're at an advantage because of the skill set your community is bringing. You already have people thinking from a more of a process perspective, like how are we doing this? How do we ensure that even if I'm just creating a small, let's say, local networking event for my community, like I don't know, I feel like the mindset coming from product leaders is just such an added bonus for you in terms of, I'm assuming people are thinking the process through more than they might in other communities.
yeah, yes, and I think that as I started thinking about who is in our community and sort of like what people are passionate about and how they work day to day, it almost felt like if women in product was a product, then how would we approach meeting the needs better? How would we approach scaling it? And it's almost like it's like a product of itself. So there are ways to in product development, you always want to like understand who is your customer, understand what those needs are, and as you understand like sort of what is the market, right? What is the market requirement, and then what are you going to how are you going to meet those needs and those requirements, right? And then the next step from there is, and then how do you what is sort of the strategy and the path to get there? And to your point, when we're talking about like building out programs, it that's the approach that we want to take. Like, who do we need to solve for? Gather information from the community, and then what is the best way to meet those needs? So as we're looking into this sort of volunteer community, how can we engage that in a way that makes sense? I don't think we've tackled it yet because there are challenges around how much time people have, and how do you put in the right structure so things can more or less like run on their own with some light management to be able to scale. But I think that's actually very exciting, both from the impact perspective and who we serve, but also just from a product, a curiosity from a needs perspective as a product person. So um, yeah, it's I'm still working through it. So as you have ideas, and I'll look for ideas from our community as well. I think everyone really gets in product, gets the concept and understands the concept, but how do you actually execute on it? That's kind
Right.
of where we're working through things.
That's awesome. And I love that you're thinking about this. That's why, I started talking to you months ago about like I want to talk about this on the podcast because I feel like you're still early in the journey
Yeah,
and it'll be fun to hopefully like regroup and maybe do another interview 6 months, a year from now
yeah,
to look at how things have changed based on what you've been putting together now.
yeah. There's so many, I think, components of the community when we think about like community. Like if when we get back to it, it's about shared experiences, common experiences, and sort of this empathy of where you are, and also to achieve a goal. Sometimes it's not to achieve a goal. Sometimes it's like, hey, we're here together to support each other and to share ideas because it makes it easier to do it together as a community. And it's also a place for resources and help, right? And so when I think about how what is most important, number one is to solidify like those connections, provide a way for people to connect meaningfully. Then there's the component of then how do you scale it and meet the needs of everyone else? And when I started to think about that, I always try to think of like what are the dynamics that are happening within the community and what can we leverage? Like when you think about like network effects, like how do you grow through network effects? How do we enable the volunteer community to drive that impact? Who do we need in the mix to help with that? And then thinking about what are the different flywheels? Like what are the flywheels within the community? So one of the things that we brought back was we've been doing an executive dinner every month because that is a critical part of the community where, at the highest levels, like, yes, we can network, women can network, and they can, they're networking at that level all the time, whether it's within their organization or outside. But to have like a community like Women in Product, where you kind of know the folks who maybe are doing similar jobs to you or have had the experience. Some folks really like to commiserate and connect and have really heart to heart, authentic conversations in small groups. That's usually what folks like to say is like they like smaller groups because they're able to really dig down into issues. But also I've also heard like I also want to have that network because I want to do my job better. I want to spend my weekend doing my stuff. So if someone in the community can help me with something in like a quicker way I could call them, then that's going to help me as well. So we've been doing executive dinners to sort of cultivate more of that connection. And one of the things that we ask is like if, as part of these dinners where there's also a call to action, like as the leaders that you are, will you come and speak on platform? Will you write an article or blog for us? Or will you sit on an advisory committee for the organization to help us to develop curriculum? So, in the same way that we're trying to build that community together, there's also that giving back. And when those folks give back, that provides a lot more value into the community itself and brings folks together in a different way. It's also very inspiring, like to see a lot of what we want to do is elevate the voices of women and their career journeys to really inspire and show that this is something you can do. And it's really hard. We
Right.
know that it's a very challenging role because I don't need to go into white product management. It's challenging, but like in a nutshell, you are building products of the future and you have to, at those levels, you need to be able to organize everyone across the organization from sales to finance to marketing, your tech counterparts. And you also have to manage your CEO, or if you're the CPO, you manage your CEO, and then also your ability to manage boards and investors as well. So the skill set and the types of challenges that folks face, I think, are quite broad. And so that support, I think, is really critical for women to really thrive and continue to grow in the profession.
And I love that you're bringing this to more people.
Yeah. I think that there are different components of the offerings because there's such a need. There's a need at early career, senior and mid-career, and at the executive level for women in product. When at the entry level, typically it's equal as far as men and women who join the profession. And then when you get to the senior level, there is a drop off in women at that level. And then there is a significant drop off at the mid level, sort of like that director level. And it's called, in the McKinsey report, it's really called like the broken rung. Like there's something between that senior level and that next level where it really drops off. So we look at what are the reasons, what are the things that we can, examples of folks who have gone through to really address that component. And folks have like folks have really benefited, I think, from participating in like as a speaker at Women in Product or as a volunteer, or folks who have actually produced our podcast. They'll, for example, use that they have that on their resume. They're able to talk about what they've done within the organization and what they've done for the community. And when they really graduate to those really much higher levels, I think the need is really around both support and then connections into other organizations. But a lot of it is giving back, like giving back into the community that enabled them to get to where they were. So
Right.
that's part of that flywheel of how do we develop like the next generation. I will say there, I've had a couple of really amazing meetings of women who have been CPOs and then have maybe gone to a different role where it's about, here are all of the things that I learned and it took me like almost 10 years to learn it. How can we start teaching it and how do we make it more visible much earlier on in the career? And then in that way, could we drive more impact sooner? Because hopefully those folks won't need to take those 10 years to know, like, hey, you do really need to invest in networking within and outside of your organization. Hey, you really need to look at how you can look at self promotion in a way that you have to understand is not about being boastful or braggy or being a certain personality, but there is a visibility that you have to create so that folks know your work, who you are, and how you do it. So there are things like that that I think need some focus. And we're really trying to work through that within the organization and make those learnings and those ideas very visible.
Yeah. It's just so beautiful when you're able to not only help develop, but also like they're giving back helps them. And I love the example, of being able to put like you've been producing a podcast or you've been doing things for the organization. I see that happen with the American Marketing Association here. Like they have an agency program, and it's a great way to for folks who are at any level in their career, or maybe they're not even in marketing yet, to jump in and bring the skills they have and point to it. I always think it's so beautiful when you're able to do that, not just here are resources to help you, but here, let's get hands on. And it gives you projects to point to, things to be proud of, things that help you develop as you go.
Absolutely.
I love that.
I think that I if you've ever done mentorship or you've ever done sort of coaching, I think that I did that with other organizations that I was involved with, and I would only spend maybe 3 hours in a month to connect with a mentee, and the impact that someone can have who has, you may not even believe that you have enough wisdom, or you like, what do I have that is worthwhile for people to listen to? And when you make that connection and you you share what you know, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's exactly right, but sometimes it's like being that sounding board for that person to tell them how you've done it, and it really helps them, that you could really have such a great impact. And sometimes it's really just the position that you're in and your ability to be that sounding board. Because oftentimes I would say that lots of, I think, mentorship that I've worked with are like, what are different ways to look at it? And so you can offer different perspectives that a lot of times maybe doesn't give them the answer, but gives them sort of like that purview of what else might be happening, right? And that helps them to continue on, or it motivates them. So I think that that giving back component is, y- if someone gave like 30 minutes to somebody, that's such a huge help. And you may not
Yeah.
realize it. That 30 minutes turns into a motivator for somebody else who might also then motivate someone else. So when you think about like that network effect and that touch point, like what is the impact of that overall? I think it's pretty amazing.
So I want to ask one more question, and that is just what does your ideal future for women in product look like?
What an awesome question. So I think from a mission perspective, and I probably should have led with this from the start, but a lot of the, I would say like a lot of the point of view that we look at is like we really want to elevate women in product at all levels, and especially at the highest levels, because our theory of change is that if we're able to support and enable women at those executive levels. Number one, it is a great inspiration and example. It's an accomplishment for that person, but then also that ability to bring folks forward where it makes sense, where you have that point of view of like, okay, this is how I did it. There's more of an empathy of, hey, my this is what my hiring practice is going to look like. This is how I'm going to approach different discussions. It just the more that women in those executive positions that we can drive, then the ships will rise, right? So I think that we've really focused there, but ultimately, I think we want more women in both thriving as well as like achieving those positions because many women are in those positions but they're not necessarily happy in those positions. So how do we
Right.
are there things that we can do to support or enable? So that's from a mission perspective, we really want women thriving in the profession. I think the next part is from an organizational perspective, we want folks who want to help and who want to volunteer. Like, how do we have a way and a great structure within the community to harness that so that as an organization we can do more? The more the community is thriving, I also think that we get a lot of sponsorship from organizations who want to recruit from our folks because finding women product managers, like we'll hear we can't find them. Like, well, they're here. Like, let's connect you.
Right.
And in working with organizations, we can also better understand things that they're looking for. So I think from that front, we want to build a very thriving, tight community. And then we also want to be able to continue to have these strong relationships with organizations outside so that we can build those connections as well. I think the last thing I'll say too is that in terms of like what does it look like ideally is like we have a very as a nonprofit, we have a very sustainable business model as well. It's really tough when you're, and I think all businesses, profit, for profit or nonprofit, experience this. But when there are less funds for example, DEI or maybe even recruiting budgets or whatever those typical budgets are that fund our organization, we have to ebb and flow with what the market looks like. So I'd also like to be able to have multiple ways that, we are providing like a sustainable environment. So the community platform is one. Like we have a freemium model where you can join. You just have to put your name and what that you're in product or your product adjacent and that you're a woman or non-binary in the community, because what we want to do is make sure that the community remains, that shared experience, and
Right.
that's really, I think, important and what makes the community very tight knit, and people are able to be more vulnerable in terms of the things that they're sharing. So we do have that freemium model, but then we also provide a premium um, option as well. So we will be building out more premium content and services. And really, the membership model is to in order for us to continue to put on the programs, to continue to support the platform, to be able to have like the right tools in place that we can connect folks. And that's going to really, I think, if we have that model where community is helping and we're able to get those memberships, then that's a way that an additional way that we can drive sustainability for the organization.
I love it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Carmen, thank you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely. It was such a pleasure. And yeah, let's definitely get on the calendar in 6 months and hopefully, now you're holding me to it, but we can look at where we are and what progress we've made from now until then. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Take care.